And when they take the sacrament, that is just the beginning. We really do focus on the integration of whole body wellness, and continuing to work on your mental health as you have this journey as part of your tool bag. So it's not just like Pam said, it's not just you have this one journey and then we leave you. It's all about integration.
Welcome to the MindHealth360 Show. I'm Kirkland Newman, and if you, your loved ones, or clients suffer from mental health issues such as depression, anxiety, insomnia, poor memory, poor attention, mood swings, exhaustion, etc., I interview the leading integrative mental health practitioners from around the world to help you understand the root causes of these symptoms, many of which may surprise you and suggest solutions to help you heal. If you like this interview, please do subscribe and forward to others who might find it helpful. If you want further information, please go to www.mindhealth360.com or find us on social media. Welcome to the MindHealth360 Show. We have Pam Conboy and we have Leah Linder with us, which is a very slightly different podcast than what we usually do. But I think it's going to be hugely interesting to our listeners because it's essentially about, how should I put it? It's an approach to mental health, which is quite different, but which is also on the rise at the moment, which involves using psychedelics essentially to really help with brain health and with neuroregeneration and neuroplasticity. And so what I'd love to do, because it's a fascinating way that these ladies are going about this in the US, is to ask them both a little bit about themselves. And so, Pam, if you start, tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to this. And then we'll move on to Leah.
It's such an interesting story, and it has everything to do with Leah. So my background, I'm a biologist by education, a clinical laboratorian by training. I've worked most of my career in marketing in the larger medical space, so mostly conventional medicine. But in the last, maybe 7 years now, I've been operating more in the naturopathic integrative medicine space, which is such a delight, right? It's such the veil has been lifted. Oh my God, that's how medicine should work, right? Trying to understand root cause medicine, treating the whole person, treating the person as an individual, addressing their sleep patterns, their food, their relationships. This is all a part of naturopathic and integrative medicine that Leah will talk about in more detail, I'm very sure. But we work together at a professional nutritional supplement company 4 or 5 years ago at this point. We worked together there for a little under 2 years, probably. I was more in the global marketing space, and Leah was doing technical support. That company was very strong in probiotics and many, many other nutritional supplements. And we had lost touch a little bit, and had lunch literally a year ago, so like May of last year. And Leah still has a clinical practice in addition to her corporate work. And she was explaining to me that, wow, in the last year and a half, I've had a lot of patients really interested in microdose psilocybin. Really? That's interesting. Do you know anything about it? Well, I do now. So, I'll let her tell the whole story, but short story from my perspective is she was having great results with her patients on a natural substance. It was allowing people to come off of SSRIs, be able to really get a hold of themselves and dig deeper and become who they're supposed to be. I know that sounds a little hyperbolic, but this is the truth. And we can talk about our experiences in the church afterwards, and it'll give you chills. But from this conversation, I'm kind of a business person, right? I've been in marketing for a really long time. How the hell do we do this? This is much safer than a lot of the medications that these people are on and are struggling with. So how you do it is a church. So, in the United States, under the Religious Freedom Freedom Restoration Act of 1993, if you have a sincere practice, in your church, and indigenous peoples and shamans and others have long integrated plant-based medicine into their practices. So we designed our church based on naturopathic practices with psilocybin as our sacrament. So it is a tool for us, but we very much focus on whole wellness. So, that is everything: movement, sleeping, eating properly, being connected to fellow humans, and sacrament, which kind of speeds up the process, which we can talk about that a little bit later, and I'll hand it over to Leah for all the other details.
Amazing.
That was a really great introduction,
Yeah.
Pam. Yeah, so my background, I'm a naturopathic physician. And like Pam said, we work together in the nutraceutical space. And so, yeah, I have had a lot of background in testing and formulations and substantiation and whatnot. And like Pam said, I had all of these patients that came to me totally separate and say, hey, I'm really interested in this. And I had only known about psychedelics from a recreational standpoint. And so, needing to do my due diligence, I was said, okay, well, let me dive into the research. And I was blown away by how much research there actually was out there for not only the treatment of depression and anxiety, but also PTSD. There was two decisions made in 2018 and 2019 by the US Food and Drug Administration designating psilocybin as a breakthrough therapy for PTSD. And so, if the FDA is behind this, I was like, okay, I don't know, where you're going to get it. And everybody was coming to me with their little baggies that they, bought from their friend or got in some guy's, back garage or something like that. And, Pam and I both coming from the nutraceutical space, I was like, I want to test it. I want to know what is in it. I want to know the potency. I want to make sure there's no mycotoxins, that there's no heavy metals, that, if we're going to use this as a therapy for my patients, I want that safety data along with it. And that just wasn't there. So that being said, had a couple of patients and it truly was a catalyst for them. We were on all naturopathic therapies. We were adjusting food and sleep and water and sunlight and, getting their nutrients balanced. And psilocybin truly was a remarkable catalyst to kind of get people over the hump so that they could start tapering off of their antidepressant medications and their anti-anxiety medications with really great success.
Amazing. I mean, that's amazing. So explain to me a little bit. First of all, so do you do microdosing or do you do the full dose? How does that work? The full dose?
Yeah, we do both. So the sacrament pairing is a microdose. And so that we have them on a protocol that helps the gentle ease of, having people be in that neuroplastic state, but not having a big adventure. So by definition, microdosing means that you get subperceptual doses of the psychedelic compound. And then there's no visual hallucination. There's no visual effects. It just basically is going to be a gentle, subtle shift in neuroplasticity. Unlike a full dose of a psychedelic experience that can be either a mini, which is between 1 and 2 grams, or a macro that is, 5+ grams, between 5 and 7. And those are going to create a very big shift for the brain. And so some people need a little bit more of a booster before they can do more maintenance with the microdose as well.
Got it.
So this is just to elaborate on that a little bit. We have two different types of people, I would say, two different buckets. So the microdosing, the way I see it, is more of a fine tuning. I'm struggling a little here, I'm a little bit stuck there, but I'm fairly functional. I'd like to just sharpen my senses, my sensibilities, my focus potentially. So either people that are looking for fine tuning, or they're a little timid about the whole exercise of working with a so-called illicit substance. They'll start off with microdosing. It is very gentle. It kind of whispers to you. You'll see things more clearly. We try to talk to people about pain attention to what they want to change so they can track whether they're seeing change. Because Leah's the formulator, and we have 3 of these microdose pairings. So the first one is calm. It's peace and harmony. So peace is the 200 milligrams of psilocybin, and then harmony is an amalgamation of botanicals and functional mushrooms that help support the outcome you're looking for. So calm is more for people who have, subtle mood issues or are feeling overly stressed. And we'll give them some cues. Okay, what typically stresses you? How would you normally respond? Now that you've been on this cycle for a few weeks, how are you responding now? So it's very subtle shifts. So as Leah was saying, we have also small group ceremonies, which are mini. So it's a psychedelic experience. It's a bigger shakeup, but you don't leave the stratosphere. You're very operable. You can talk. Some will sit in peace. Others are very chatty. So it's a very moderate dose, but it is a psychedelic dose. It's a little bit more of a shakeup. And those are people that are looking for a shakeup, right? They are looking to become unstuck. They need something more than a subtle shift. So the small groups with people that are very prone to being extroverted, that can be very helpful. We set it up as a group intention. The last one we had was forgiveness and gratitude. Who couldn't use more of that, right? So we go in with, this is our umbrella intention, and do the ceremony and have this delicious tea, and then you do your own journey, and we come back to ceremony. We do this in a macro setting as well for the very stuck. Those are mostly people, at least in my experience thus far, have a lot of trauma. And they just haven't been able to shift out of it. They can't put their baggage down. So these are high doses, 5+ grams, and they're all individual depending on the person, what medications they might potentially have on board, etc. But these are highly individualized, and they're very significant. Every single time we have someone for an individual macro journey, they come here with a different energy than they leave. They come here with a specific intention. Maybe I want to lose weight. They leave here with a solution to the underlying problem. It's really breathtaking, and it sticks months and months and months and months later because we track it. We do integration. We encourage people to come to our events because it's not a one and done. It's sort of a beginning of your journey when you get shook up like that.
And so when you say it's not a one and done, I mean, could it be sort of one dose, but then the integration is what then follows? Or does it have to be several doses?
Depends.
It depends. Yeah.
It depends. Yeah, it depends on the person. But really, we do see that, some people can have a single significant journey, and that's enough for them to shift in whatever way they need to. But again, when they take the sacrament, that is just the beginning. We really do focus on the integration of whole body wellness, and, continuing to work on your mental health as you have this journey as part of your tool bag. So it's not just, like Pam said, it's not just you have this one journey and then we leave you. It's all about integration. And that's really why we started the church as well, because everybody's really craving community and they want to be connected, and they want to know that there's like-minded people, that that mental health doesn't have to be a taboo, right? That we can talk about it, we can bring it to the surface, and we can also have community there to support us through that journey. So it's really precious the way that it's all been set up.
So in terms of, because one of the important things obviously about these plant medicines and psychedelics is the integration. And so what I'm hearing from you is, usually you think about integration in the context of therapy. So, you hear that actually every journey, so to speak, whether it's with psilocybin or, whatever psychedelic, should be accompanied by a therapist who can sort of take you through the experience and out the other side and help integrate, because that's really the most important part. So I have two questions. The first is, do you guys work with therapists? But the second is also, it seems to me that you guys have a slightly different approach and you're coming at it from more of a naturopathic, whole person perspective. And one of the things I try to do with my work is to really bring together the world of trauma and trauma treatment and somatic therapies with the world of, functional medicine, biochemistry. Because at the moment, they're slightly separate. So you have your functional medicine doctors and your naturopaths who are all about, let's optimize your lifestyle, let's optimize your biochemistry. And yes, let's look a little bit, obviously, at your trauma and at your the psycho-spiritual side. But you have a lot of therapists who are really only focusing on the psychological or psycho-spiritual side, and they're not necessarily trained in sort of the nutrition and the biochemistry and all those aspects. And what I'm hearing from you, which is different, is that you guys are looking at it from the biochemical perspective, from the sort of let's optimize your biochemistry through nutrition, through lifestyle, through sleep, through exercise, through sunlight. And I don't know how much you do testing, if any. And that's sort of the context, the envelope for the psychedelic experience, as opposed to maybe more the therapeutic side. But I may be wrong. So tell me more about that.
So I'll take the first, and then Leah takes a second. I think it makes more sense. So she can talk in more greater detail about the naturopathic approach. And she does have a practice outside of the church. The church doesn't offer medical support because we're a church, but Leah does. Dr. Leah provides medical support for members if they want it. So to go back to that first question about therapists, yes, we absolutely, this is one of my primary missions, really, is to be in connection with therapists, especially ones that are psychedelically trained. Both Leah and I are as sitters, both on the professional side as well as peer support. But we do have a whole litany of therapists that are psychedelic friendly, and if people need them, and we put everybody in connection. So it's not just therapists that we have these relationships with, meaning we know them, we've met with them, they know what we do, we have them go through ceremony with us so they know what we do and how we do it, and then allow our members, here is community resources. If you're looking for EMDR, if you're still stuck in depression, if you need to really dive deeper into psychological work, these are great people to investigate. But we do this with yoga teachers. We do it with breath work folks. We do it with sound healing people, because that's part of the toolbox, right? So the integration is making the experience and what you got out of the experience part of your life.
Yeah.
So maybe I need therapy, but somebody else just needs to go to sound therapy and come to our events. So we have 2 events every month, new moon and full moon. One is more science and sermon, so it's more lecture style, informational mostly. And the second is more experiential. So this month it's manifesting change, which is a lot to do with habits. So we had lecture on Saturday. In a couple of weeks, we're going to have a big cold plunge challenge and, really shake things up, jumpstart change. So we have themes. We have the lecture and the science, then we have the experience. And I have never, I'm very introverted. I have never seen or met a bunch of people that I felt more immediately connected to than the people that come to these events, that participate in our ceremonies. And the growth of the church is very, very grassroots, which is exactly what we want. Because although we're doing everything by the rules, this is kind of an unusual business that we're operating under. So we want to get genuine referrals, genuine feedback, genuine testimony. All our products are tested up and down, inside out, 100% quality. and what we do to put it all together. We have a gentleman locally that's a neurologist, conventionally trained. We get probably 3 patients from him a month.
Wow.
From anything from TBI to early Alzheimer's to just general chronic depression. So we rely on those people. We want to learn from them. We want them to learn from us. It is very much a community. Leah and I are just sort of putting pieces together, but it's not our thing. It is the church.
Well, it's fascinating. And before we move on to Leah, I just have a few follow-up questions. So you mentioned that, you know, some people might need therapy, others might need sound healing or yoga. How do you determine who needs what? That's my first question. I'll let you answer that.
That's such a good question because everybody asks it. My typical answer is that, okay, there's a giant toolbox available to you, a real big one. And I may only want duct tape and a sledgehammer and maybe a Phillips head, right? Those are the only tools I actually need to get the job I need to have done. So what I typically tell people, and I'm sure Leah will elaborate, you need to think about what it is you're trying to accomplish and your personality and your lifestyle and try the tools. We offer the ability to try these tools for nothing. By the way, you know, the yoga teacher will give a free class or they'll do a class for us. Try it. If it resonates with you, that's likely one of your tools. So hold on to that, put it in the little bag that you strap around your waist, right? If you've had therapy and therapy is good and helpful for you, fantastic. But maybe if I'm stuck in trauma, there are certain modalities, and our therapists help us to help people work through it. You know, if you're stuck in serious trauma, EMDR might be a great tool for you, and you're going to know really fast if that works. So we try to match things up and help people decide what might be a good tool, but ultimately it's their decision. We just make recommendations. We give you the sampler platter and ask you to take a plate full of the stuff that works.
Got it. And do you train the people that work with you? So are your yoga teachers and sound healers and therapists, are they sort of trained presumably in the modality? I mean, they must be trained somewhat in, you know, dealing with the effects of these psychedelics.
So we do the sitting right now, but we have people that are interested in sitting. So we require they go through a program, they do a little internship with us. Our collaborators, often the therapists are as informed or maybe more informed than we are because they've had a long-standing interest in this kind of medicine. And it's appealing to them that they know it's safe, right? That it's a very high quality medicine that comes from us. They know who we are. They've been to my home. This is a very close relationship that we have with people. So they are very aware of how we do things, and we learn about how they do things, and we share and, you know, cross-pollinate, so to speak. We do not have a formal program. You know, that's something that we would like to do in the future, but we're pretty young right now, you know, and we're funding this all out of pocket. So we do most of the work ourselves. We do have a lot of volunteers that help with some odds and ends. We have one person that does some accounting help because God help us, if Leah and I had to do the accounting, we'd really be in trouble.
I know the feeling. Okay. And then, so I have a lot more questions of that, but first let's go to Leah and just ask that second piece about sort of the more naturopathic integration and the more sort of, you know, medical side of things. And then Pam, I'd like to go back to you for something that you raised, but first Leah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like Pam said, we do not offer any medical advice. We operate as a church. And so, again, we bring in practices about naturopathic philosophy that are part of our sermons. So, we talk about eating whole foods, we talk about mindfulness, we talk about, water therapy, and how all of these things can influence our health and wellness. But again, we're not giving any medical advice or anything like that. If somebody does have medical, query, then they come and see me in my private practice, and that's totally separate from the church. So again, in the church, I am Reverend Leah Linder, and Pam is Reverend Pam Conboy, and then in my private practice, I get to operate as a doctor still.
Exactly. Okay, so that makes sense. And then Pam, one of the things, in fact, maybe both of you, I'd love to find out more about the mechanics of, how this works. You mentioned that you have a neurologist who sends you sort of 3 patients a month, and or was it a week? I can't remember. But so you mentioned, one was for TBI, traumatic brain injury, one was for sort of dementia. And so can you explain a little bit the mechanism behind how these substances work on the brain and how they can really help with things like BDNF and, neuroplasticity and possibly inflammation, I imagine, but I'll hand it over to you guys.
So I'll start and Leah will fill in the rest. But it is really fast. There's an abundance of research out there for anybody that's interested. Just type in how psilocybin works in the brain. Go to a reputable source if you really want to dig heavy duty into it. But the basics are that psilocybin and other traditional psychedelic compounds really drives the expression of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which increases brain growth and connectivity of the individual neurons, right? So you can see this in functional MRI. In the last 10 years, there's been so much more advanced research. You can see the dendrites and the little spines coming off of the connections in your neurons. So your dendrites are the terminal axon. So that's how the neurons connect. You're making new connections, novel connections, and they're getting stronger because there are more of them. And the psilocybin also turns on some gene expression to make your brain more neuroplastic like it was as a child. I mean, we all have the capacity to make new brain cells. But if you're not feeding it the right things, you're not practicing, peace in your life, and you're under a tremendous amount of stress, you're not going to get a lot of that. You're going to get stuck in your old patterns. And this is how psilocybin helps. So meditation will get you to the same place, but it takes a very long time, and people are not terribly patient, and their life is very, very full. This will give you a jump start, and you can see it. You can see it on imaging that you're growing new neurons and they're talking to each other in a different way. So it allows you to sort of step back from your habituations, the way you typically do things, to see it from a different perspective. So there's physiological and functional change in your brain. That's how this works. And the inflammation part, this is why we are also very much proponents of whole mushrooms rather than single molecule. So single molecule is what a pharmaceutical company would do, right? They try to take the active ingredient, do maybe a little twist, a change, paint it up a little so they can patent it and make money and do the research and justify the spend and whatnot. But you're missing out on all the other goodies, the fibers, the anti-inflammatory factors that come from the whole mushroom. So we use whole mushrooms that we test, and we put into a powder and into a capsule for our microdosing, and we manage those same approach for the macro doses. But Leah could go into more detail about the science.
And then just before Leah starts, so you make your own supplements, which are, when you say they're tested, who are they tested by? And where do you manufacture them? And what sort of brand do you have?
So we source all of our products from either established raw material providers. They're organic. They've been tested for everything, for potency, for things that you don't want in there. So these are very high grade professional ingredients that we purchase. The mushrooms come from private growers, given the kind of material this is, but we also test that. These are all third-party accredited laboratories. So we test the psilocybin mushrooms not only for all of the potential issues like mold and other toxins and heavy metals and just general garbage, but we also test for both psilocybin and psilocin. So psilocin is the active metabolite. So you can just test for psilocybin and maybe not really understand how potent the mushroom is if you're not testing for the metabolite as well. So we have a very accurate understanding of how our mushrooms work, how potent they are. I mean, everyone does have a little bit of a different adventure with psilocybin mushrooms, but we use two very gentle and friendly strains that allow people to go deep without, being slammed with a hammer.
So you
Some
choose them.
strains are hard.
Yeah. And so you choose because, I don't know much about this, but there are different types of mushroom that you can choose to sort of essentially control the effect. And so you guys choose your mushrooms on the basis that they're more gentle and that they have certain effects. I mean, how many types of these mushrooms are there?
Many, hundreds.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's,
Amazing.
Hundreds.
Well, I think the only thing that I just wanted to add in there too is that psychedelics generally are going to stimulate the serotonin 5-HT2A receptor. Yeah, I got that one right. Which is also where that is going to stimulate not only the gene expression for decreasing inflammation in the body, but also brain-derived neurotropic factor. So that's kind of the basis of how that is going to affect the brain. It's the same receptor that a lot of SSRIs or other antidepressants also stimulate too. And so there's some logic in there that if we can stimulate that receptor with psilocybin, that it actually is going to shift and change the brain and be true medicine that's going to address the system, not the symptoms. Because most people that are on SSRIs are on them for a really long time, and then they just have to titrate up and up and up to get the same effects. The reason why I love and believe that psilocybin is true medicine is that the more you use it, the less you need to achieve the same benefits. And so it's truly healing the brain and helping heal those neural connections that could be hiccuped or, stuck in a pattern when it comes to trauma and whatnot. So it really does help people mentally heal. So that was the only other thing that I wanted to add into there.
And so I guess my question is, I've always understood that it's really important to do these substances in a therapeutic context, right? So that you're held, and so that really it's the integration in the therapy that really matters, as opposed to the substance itself, which is more of a facilitator. And so I'm thinking of, people who use it recreationally and who say, oh, I'll just take psilocybin and, I have trauma, I have depression, and this will help me feel better. Is that a possibility? Like, is it, we talk about set and setting as being so, so important. And obviously with your church, you provide a very conscious and deliberate set and setting that's a very holding space, which is a huge advantage. But for people who are sort of doing this recreationally, I have heard of people having bad trips or having sort of side effects, etc. What is your take on that? And, are you sort of adamant that it's very important to do it in a held space with the right people, or can you have positive effects if you're just doing it on your own?
So for us, what we do not know, set and setting is hugely important, and we take great pains to make sure it's optimized. But we do a lot of work in advance too. So we do preparation work with the people who attend our ceremonies, help them think about diet, use of any other substances. We'd like you to be as clean as possible. Really start thinking about what your intention and why an intention is important and how it will sort of flavor your whole experience. And the day of, we do formal ceremony. Leah leads a group meditation and some gentle stretching, and we have a formal ceremony. It's all very somber, but enthusiastic. So people come in a little bit nervous. Like I said, they leave entirely different people. And then we follow up with integration, either independently or in a group. The nice thing about the group too, because it's just Leah and I really running this thing, is that once you've gone through this experience with a group, and it's 5 to 6 people maximum. So these are small groups, but they bond with each other. They have their own integration group, in addition to what we can do for them, in addition to what the church does, in addition to all of the resources that we can point them to if you need additional therapy, if you need additional support. So I think some people absolutely do have a pretty good experience if they approach mushrooms in a similar way, if they have a good quality source. But they will often miss out on this preparation, the way to think about intention, the integration afterwards, and that community experience, which we offer. But there are certainly people that come to us that have done mushrooms by themselves with good or bad effect. Most people will say, and Lee will talk probably more about this, that what you think of as a bad trip is just a process that you needed to go through, and it's just can be uncomfortable sometimes. We have had great fortune in that we've not had anyone experience a difficult trip with us. And I like to believe that it's because we take great pains to make sure they're in an optimized space. They get medical assessment. If they're recommended by a physician, we talk to them about the dosing structure, what else they have on board. Leah can talk to other physicians, of course, on a very high level medically. So we try to offer all the tools for success for our people, because that's what we're in this for, right? Is really to help people get past their stuckness and reconnect with themselves and the community and, spiritual integration.
Totally.
And that being said,
Sorry, Leah, continue. Yeah.
I just wanted to add on to that just for a moment, is that it's also really important to realize that humans have co-evolved with fungus, and there is, a lot of research back there that, when we, started eating mushrooms, that's when our prefrontal cortex started to get really strong and really big. And that's all where judgment comes from and decision making. And so I do believe that even if somebody is recreationally experiencing psilocybin and magic mushrooms, that there can be benefit there, and we just take it a step further to say that although there is benefit, we're going to hold you in this container of community, of whole wellness as well, so that you get more bang for your buck, that you really do have that integration as part of your practice of life, which is going to potentially speed up the process.
And also, I assume that the quality of what you use is also very determinant. I mean, you don't know if you're doing it recreationally, what the quality of what you're using is, whereas you guys are very careful, presumably, about the substances that you use, their purity, their effectiveness, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where are you guys based?
Reno, Nevada.
Reno, Nevada. Okay. And how do people find out about you, and is your community growing, and how many people do you have, and do you notice there's a real interest and sort of growth behind this?
So we launched officially at the end of March, and we had the good fortune of being covered by our local newspaper that covers sort of all the activity around town. Reno's a small town. but we got a very nice coverage. So our open house, our launch, had about 200 people total. A lot of very interested people. So membership is just basically you're sharing with us who you are, proving it with a identification, because we want to make sure you're a human and of adult age, letting us know if you have if you're taking any psychedelic medicines or any other chronic medications, because there are some that don't play well with psilocybin. We need to know about that. And then you accept the tenets of this church, because that accepting of the tenets and becoming a member is what protects us and protects the member under the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, that you sincerely accept the tenets. So how we grow is a lot of word of mouth, which is the intention, because given the business that we're in, people need to trust that you're not some crazy person. You're not dealing drugs. By the way, we don't sell bags of mushrooms. We do the psilocybin microdose that we deliver in pairings in a very professional box. It's lovely. It's manufactured under good manufacturing procedures. And then the macros are all done under our direct supervision. You do that here at my home with us, because we want to be responsible. We want to be safe. We want to make sure that people are having an optimized environment to explore these plant medicines.
Got it. And in terms of sort of, you mentioned, certain side effects if, you can't take them. So for instance, if somebody's on SSRIs, do they have to, is it compatible with taking psilocybin?
It's
Yes,
a little bit
absolutely.
competitive, but I'll let Leah talk about it, because it taps on that same
Same
receptor.
receptor. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. Because it does tap on that same receptor, it is a bit more competitive. So if they are doing a mini or macro dose, we tend to elevate that for those individual experiences. And then also for the sacrament pairing for the microdosing as well, they just generally don't get as strong of effects. So their neuroplasticity is dampened in that space. But a lot of times I do work with, the prescribing physician that, can talk about how we can start tapering, people off of them while they are taking microdosing. But again, this is separate from the church. So this is just through my private practice, because a lot of people want to start tapering off of their SSRIs and not be so dependent on them.
Completely. And tell me, are there other organizations like yours in the US that are, is this a recognized, because obviously, there's a lot of research coming out now on the benefits of psychedelics for mental health, and there's a lot of interest. But, I think on the 4th of June, in fact, of this year, the FDA, there was a slight setback in terms of the FDA approval process. So, we're not quite there yet. So is the church sort of, this is sort of like a legal loophole that you guys are using, because correct me if I'm wrong, and it probably varies state by state, but is it legal in Nevada where you guys are?
Only Oregon is decriminalized completely.
Got it.
There are a few municipalities, Oakland, California, Denver, Colorado. There are some places in Massachusetts that are coming up pretty quickly. I think you were talking about the disappointing judgment of the FDA on MDMA and trauma, which was an abomination, and we could have a whole discussion about that. But for the mushrooms, it's still scheduled by the FDA.
Yeah.
Scheduled, right? So it's the FDA considers that, even though it also assigned it breakthrough status, it's still considered a medication with high probability of addiction, which is absolutely not true at all, and no therapeutic value. Again, not true at all. So the legal status is way behind what the science tells us now. So churches, you could call it a loophole, but we're actually behaving as a church. We're doing all the things. So it's not really a loophole if you practice it properly. That said, there are some churches in the United States that really mail it in. They're interested in selling mushrooms under the guise of being a church and do very little to develop community and provide other support services. There are those types, for sure. That's just a straight up business that is using a loophole. But there have been ayahuasca churches in the United States, a handful of them, that have existed for a very long time, and they're very spiritual, meaning this is all about native practice. So the option to do this, I mean, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act was passed in 1993. So this has been available for quite a while. In the 60s, 70s, you know, and then you had the war on drugs. The idea of using psychedelics for most people was horrifying, right? Very scary. There's so much more information. There's so much more science. There's so much more practical use. And there are people like us, although I'm not aware of another church that does it completely like us. I like to think we're very unique. But it is a way. It's a way to get safe plant medicine from a very reputable source within the confines of a holistic approach. So we have lots of other tools for you.
And I think that's, that's a really important point to make. So, your USP is that you are, you take a much more whole person approach. And, you are, Leah, you're a trained naturopath, and Pam, you're a biologist with a lot of experience with, the functional medicine world. And it seems to me that the way you operate is, the substance is just one small part of what you guys do. And that's why I'm curious, is there, are you aware of any other churches that operate in the same way? You implied not. So your USP, your unique selling proposition, would be that sort of more whole integration approach. So you would say that really you are unique in probably the world, essentially, and what you offer? Is that fair to say?
Boy, I'd love to say that. And I genuinely am unaware of anyone else approaching this in the truly sincere way we're doing it. I mean, and this is, there are a few reasons for that. Number one, we don't want to go to jail. We want to abide by being a sincere church, a sincere religious, we're a nonprofit. We did all the paperwork. We crossed all the T's, dotted all the I's. We are very interested in doing this safely and within the constraints that we can do this. But the other thing is that, the rates of depression and isolation in the United States, especially since after COVID, but it was growing before then, are astonishing. Astonishing. I was at, we just did a lecture on Saturday, and there was an older woman, I would say she's probably 70, that had tears in her eyes. She's like, I'm so ready for this. I so need a community like this. People are incredibly transparent and cry with relief on a regular basis that there's an option for them. Not the limited things that they've been told they can do, but there is actually soul-feeding option. And if you don't think that's genuinely heart-filling and like, wow, I do that pretty regularly. Holy shit. Wow, this is magical. And Lee and I will look at each other like, it's like magic. So it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's so
because I think,
to witness people truly shift.
Well, because I think one of the big problems in our society is, the increasing rates of isolation, the increasing rates of sort of tech addiction. And I worry about our teens in terms of, their dependence on technology and social media. and which in a way is very isolating, despite the fact that paradoxically, you know, it sort of connects people, but in a very impersonal way a lot of the time. And so there is this thirst, I think, to get back to a sense of community. And, you know, what are the usual ways? I mean, in America, church going is a lot more prevalent than in Europe, for instance. You know, so there is that, but in Europe, there's a real dissolution of religious institutions or any sort of institutions that create and foster a sense of community. And so you guys are really, you know, offering, you know, answering a need for that, you know, to try and bring people together. And I think that's really, really important. So, you know, hats off to you. And is there any, you know, why did you guys choose psilocybin and not something like MDMA or, you know, which has also had a very good research track record in terms of PTSD and other things? Like, you know, there are other psychedelics out there and other substances out there that have been shown to have, you know, very, very positive effects for mental health. Why did you guys choose to focus on psilocybin?
Well,
So a
from my
big reason,
perspective, it's natural,
yeah,
completely natural.
yeah. It's natural, and that the safety profile is extraordinary. So even though there are other psychedelics out there that have some really good research on them, we can, you know, kind of ubiquitously say that for 99% of people, it's super safe and it's plant medicine versus something that's synthetically derived.
Yeah, got it. And sort of things like ayahuasca and, you know, would you ever think of incorporating that, or is that just more risky?
I think yes, it is more risky. The safety profile isn't as strong as well. And then it's also, you know, we have to think about indigenous practices and, you know, people that have access to it. You know, we have some friends that believe so fully in ayahuasca and the transformation that it can provide. But again, it's a messy substance, and it's a messy sacrament because most people purge. And go on these really big journeys. You need to have a lot more sitters that are available. And so, you know, you never know what will come down the pipeline in the future. But for right now, we're sticking with psilocybin.
Got it. And what is motivating you both? Like, what's your key motivation for doing this?
To help heal the mental health crisis on the planet.
No change.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Change is, it's breathtaking, Kirkland.
Well, that's the thing. So tell me about, like, you know, one or two shifts that you've seen in people that have just been, you know, that people maybe haven't responded to SSRIs or conventional mental health treatments. I agree with Leah 100%. We have a huge mental health crisis, a huge epidemic, especially among teens. And so how do you guys find that this meets the need? And can you give me an example of where you've seen something really work where conventional treatment hasn't?
I think we could probably do a couple of cases. Do you want to talk about our big recent journey, Leah? And maybe we could also talk about a female one. I could do a female, and then maybe you could do our male, right? So these are both these are both macro journeys, right? So minimum 5 grams. The one I'm going to talk about was 5 grams of psilocybin, whole mushroom. Leah will talk one a little bit more than that, which is super interesting. So this woman had come to us, and her intention, she's a heavier woman. Her intention was really to have a better relationship with food, get kind of control over her eating habits, get more healthy. She has metabolic syndrome. It was really more of a physical shift she was looking for through mental willpower or, you know, insights, or she wanted to try this to help her, something she's been struggling with for very many years. So we did our ceremony. She took her journey. A lot of people just will sit in one place under a tree. I have a tree that's a great mushroom sitter. So a lot of people like to sit underneath a tree, but there are lots of very comfortable options. Anyhow, at the end of her journey, when we sort of do a debrief, a little ceremony to wrap up, and then a debrief about your experience, she came in thinking she needed to control her eating. She left from this experience having mourned her father, that she had never mourned, that she couldn't even speak his name within her family unit because it was so devastating. So she had been focused on a symptom. So she got, which is great. You get your head into that space that it sort of surrounds what your key issue is. But she focused on the symptom because that's so easy to pick out of nowhere, right? I have all this extra weight. So one of her key underlying problems was I couldn't I couldn't let go of my father, and I was unconnected to my own children. So this woman would come home from work every day and drink a bottle of tequila and kind of unplug and tune everybody out. This is months later, and she's still doing it. She walks around the lake with her kids almost every evening after work, drinks very rarely, has just, intuitively shifted to better foods and more awareness about what she's eating. She is a bright, shining star. I mean, we see her fairly regularly, and she glows from across the street. So she's continuing to take the microdose to keep the neuroplasticity and the awareness. But this one macro dose shifted her from this very stuck place and opened up the world of what was holding her back and allowed her to make great strides forward.
Just
Really,
just one dose.
one journey, yes.
Wow.
It makes me have tears in my eyes. It's so beautiful. So I have another one. Recently, we did another macro experience for a gentleman. He has been on SSRIs for 35, almost 40 years, and major depression. He had a childhood where he grew up in a very affluent family. He said that he was given everything that he ever wanted, but nothing he ever needed. So there was a lot of not emotional connection with his family and whatnot. And so when he got into his adult years, he ran a very successful business at selling cut flowers in Mexico. And he ended up getting involved with some gang violence because of it. So he basically saved this woman from getting beat up and raped. And it was one of, the gang members' friends. And then he started going through this crazy, fit of got really addicted to cocaine, super drug addict, but he said nobody ever knew. He was having, gang members that were showing up and shooting at him 6 feet from him and missing. I mean, he just had this incredible story of, I was living this total separate life because nobody in my family knew. My wife didn't know. My kids didn't know. Nobody knew what was going on. And it was really wild. So we gave him, 5 grams and then bumped him up to 7 grams because he had been on SSRIs for so long. And most people, once they get to a point at about a half an hour, 45 minutes, they're kind of on their own journey. And he sat there for, 5 hours and talked fluidly, logically, linearly, and told us this phenomenal story. And I've never experienced that with somebody before, that he was so lucid. And so as he was starting to, come out of it and whatnot, when we were transporting him back into town, I said, how was this experience for you? And he said, it was remarkably cathartic because I had never told anybody that story ever, even in intensive therapy sessions, and, had been in counseling and therapy and, seen all different types of practitioners to help support him with that. And he was like, and I finally was able to tell my story.
Which is so important. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
that
important.
he was seen and heard, and it was really interesting with this particular patient, beyond that he could have a very lucid conversation on 7 grams of mushrooms for hours. We were both astonished. But what we saw in him is that he would express these really horrific, from childhood all the way to current day, these horrific traumatic experiences. And you could see him white knuckle it, right? He kind of, his eyes would fill up a little bit with tears, and he'd get the rest of the story out and then completely shift gears. So he's a protector. He's a very strong, very protective human being, and he needs bigger dose. I mean, and he probably needs some specific kind of therapy that can help with the trauma. But he's, he has explored a bunch of different things. And it's my understanding that, because we've heard from him, we certainly talked to him and his primary care physician. It's like, wow, I need more of that. That was such a relief. So the deepest, darkest, can come out easily. And yeah, being witnessed is a big part of this type of journey.
Well, it's so important also for integration, integration of the different brain parts, whether it's your prefrontal cortex, your limbic system, your brainstem, for the integration, it's so important to be witnessed essentially, and to tell your story and to be heard, so that there's a sort of coherence that starts to formulate, and an integration that starts to formulate just by, expressing that story. And so, being able to express that, and the catalyst being this sort of substance, is amazing, really. So, I mean, amazing, guys. You've been very generous with your time. So I will, we'll wrap up. But is there anything else? First of all, how can people find you? And second of all, is there anything else that you would like to say, in terms of this sort of mental health crisis, and also your plans for the future, like your vision, essentially?
Wow, that was a lot of questions. I'm sure you could probably post this up someplace, but anyone is very welcome to visit us at setasseminary.org, SETAS seminary.org. The front of the website is quite simple. It tells about us, our board members, our philosophy, some information about events and that kind of thing. Only behind the member portal that you get some deep detail about sacrament, the science behind it. We have video lectures, we have publications, we have blog posts, we have a lot of really good information on the inside. So that's just out of an abundance of caution. We don't want psilocybin being searched and our website come up, because we're really interested in working with people who are sincere about this practice and really are looking to improve their health. So anyone can become a member. Membership is free. We do ask for donations if you have the means, because it's out of pocket for us, except for we do require donations for macro ceremonies, as well as the shipped microdose product. You can reach us through there. I do all of the comms through the website, so you'll be talking to me directly. We'd love to hear from anybody who's interested in learning more. Now I forgot your other question.
You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram as well, at SETA Seminary.
SETA Seminary. And then my other question was sort of your vision for the future. Like, what's your, what would you like to see happen in the world?
From my perspective, we grow and we inspire other people to do similar things. So the network, the community, the cohesion just grows. A very positive direction, in contrast to life as we know it on the planet these days.
Agreed.
Yeah, and just a tandem off of that too, I think help getting the word out there in a safe environment is going to help with the mainstream acceptance of psychedelic assisted therapy. And so that's a big goal for us as well. And, I think that there's also a big need to elucidate on the long-term effects of, microdosing and these macrodosing, because it's just not out there. and optimal dosing protocols and, the potential therapeutic applications, much more so than just depression and anxiety and PTSD. There's some research that's coming out now about supporting people with diabetes and metabolic syndrome. There is, thoughts on also IBS and IBD that's starting to come out as well. And so I think that, as we recognize that our body is one unit, right, and the leg bone's connected to the microbiome, that we're really going to start seeing the benefits of greater applications of using this type of plant medicine for whole body wellness.
Yeah, and that brings me to one other sort of slightly more technical question, which is, neurologically, like have these substances, I know that they boost BDNF and they can dampen inflammation, but have they been tried in sort of dementia patients, Parkinson's patients, like neurodegenerative diseases? Is there evidence that these can be helpful?
So there's early research, and just recently I saw one that was published this year for psilocybin for dementia prevention. So there is definitely more work. We always need more work. Any academic paper that you read, that's always the last sentence, right? More work is needed. So we definitely do need more work, but the mechanism of action where you're increasing the number and strength of neural connections makes sense for certain types of dementia. But I'm sure Leah could elaborate on that more. But yes, there is early research.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, a huge part of that is that not only is it strengthening the glial network, which is the immune system of the brain, but it also can, encourage dendritic development, right? Which is those new connections and supporting. So if you get, the inflammation coming down in the brain and then you start making new pathways, then absolutely, there is potential that it could support those with neurodegenerative diseases.
Makes sense. And is there any evidence of, the effects on the neuroendocrine system? I mean, I know you mentioned in terms of obviously, serotonin receptors. Presumably there must be some effects on dopamine, but also I wonder, what about the effects on, cortisol, for instance? Do we have anything on that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a bunch of information as far as how, psilocybin and other psychedelics can interact with the whole endocrine system. So there is some research out there that shows that by stimulating that serotonin receptor, it's also going to not only decrease cortisol levels, but also norepinephrine levels. Yeah. Those transiently can increase during a macro experience, but that's helping the brain find a new neural pathway. But overall, it can help calm those down. There also is some research I saw a couple of weeks ago showing that it can affect both testosterone and progesterone levels as well. So we know that, cortisol is derived from progesterone, innately through the hormone pathway. And so by, lowering your cortisol levels, you can also actually boost some of your other endocrine hormones like estrogen and testosterone as well.
Interesting. Fascinating. Well, I must say it's absolutely fascinating. I think you guys are doing some amazing work. And it is a not-for-profit, is that correct? It is.
That's correct.
Yeah. Yeah, which is wonderful. So hats off for what you guys are doing. I think it's incredible and much needed. And I think you're probably blazing a trail for a lot of people to sort of follow in your footsteps. And I think there's definitely a huge need. What I particularly like about what you guys do is the whole sort of integration piece. So it's not just about the substance, it's really about the sort of whole body, whole person approach. I'm super obsessed with sort of the getting the biochemistry, the psychospiritual, and the lifestyle behavioral pieces in harmony in the sort of 360-degree way. So I think you guys sort of embody that and what you do. And so I'm very, very impressed and well done. And yeah, good luck. And And just one final thing, you guys are going to be at the Integrative Medicine for Mental Health Conference, is that correct? So, which is taking place from the 10th to the 13th of October in Washington, D.C., 2024, in case this is going to be released, in case you're listening later. But and so I'm very much looking forward to seeing you guys there. I'm very much looking forward to finding out more, and also to making sure that our visitors really get to know your work. And I'm super excited about that. So very, very grateful and very much looking forward to seeing you guys there. And, good continuation, as they say in French, because you're doing some great stuff. Thank you so much for listening to the MindHealth360 Show. I hope that we've helped you realize that mental health symptoms have root causes that can and need to be addressed in order to sustainably heal, and have given you some ideas about steps you, your loved ones, or clients may take to start their healing journey. Please share this interview with anyone you think may find it helpful, and don't forget to subscribe to keep up to date with our latest interviews on integrative mental health. If you want further information, please go to www.mindhealth360.com or find us on social media. This information is for educational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or to replace medical advice. Please always consult your healthcare practitioner before discontinuing any medication or implementing any changes in your diet, lifestyle, or supplement program.